Hello, and welcome to this raw time-lapse workflow tutorial. My name is the Red Owl, and I'll be your guide on this little journey. So, let's go ahead and get started. As you can see, I've already brought up my photos for my time-lapse sequence here in Adobe Bridge. And the first step is to just go to the first photo and open it in Camera Raw. Now, the reason I've chosen Bridge, I can also open Camera Raw to make my adjustments. So here we are, and I don't need to make any adjustments because, well, I've already made them, and I like what I've got here. But if I was going to, first thing I would do is check white balance, check exposure, crank up the recovery if necessary. One of the reasons I really love Camera Raw is that you can recover a lot of detail, and there's really just a lot of flexibility in post for time-lapse. So make sure before you leave that you've made your adjustments, because you're about to copy them to every single photo in your time-lapse sequence. So just be sure this is what you want. You've added enough clarity, enough vibrance, enough contrast, all that. So once you're done, just go ahead down here and click Done. Now, the next step is to right-click again on that first picture and then go down to a little part here called Develop Settings. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is to copy those settings. Now, I'm not actually going to do that, but if I was going to, that's where it is. So just go ahead and click away from that right there, and then click the second photo in your time-lapse sequence, and then go all the way to the last photo and shift-click so you have every photo selected in your time-lapse sequence but the first one. So just right-click on any of the selected pictures and then go back down here to Develop Settings. Now, it doesn't say Paste Settings right here, but if I was to do that, that's where it would be. And then basically, it would just paste all the adjustments that you made to that first picture to every single picture in your sequence. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and click off of that because I don't need to paste those settings. And then go ahead and deselect. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is to click on the last picture here, right-click, and then open in Camera Raw. Now, I'm doing this just simply so we can get a good look at the adjustments that we've made. And let's say I wasn't satisfied with this and I wanted to brighten it up, change the white balance. You're probably wondering, how in the world am I going to make it match so the rest of the time-lapse flows from the brightest picture in the first picture in the sequence to this picture here that I would be making adjustments to? Well, I'm going to be taking you to a program next called LR Timelapse that allows you to keyframe these adjustments. So I don't actually need to keyframe these adjustments though, because I'm generally pretty happy with this. So I'm going to go ahead and click Done, and then go ahead and deselect, and that's the end of Adobe Bridge. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over to LR Timelapse. Now, don't let it fool you. LR Timelapse is not just for Lightroom. So it works with any Camera Raw file no matter what you've done. So just go ahead and open up all your photos here, as I've done. Just so you know, hard drives are called volumes. So when you're navigating to your photos and let's say you put them on an external hard drive like I have, all you need to do is go to volumes and then find the hard drive where they're on and navigate from there. So, but before we go any further, you can find LR Timelapse here at lrtimelapse.com. And then they've also got a fantastic forum in case you have any questions. I actually just had a question here, which is why I had that open. But Gunther's a great developer. He replies pretty fast, so if you're feeling generous, you should definitely donate. It's a free program, but it is for Mac and PC both, so you don't need to worry about cross-platform compatibility. But And if you have any questions beyond this tutorial, I and many others more talented than I hang out at the timescapes.org forum. Um, there's a lot of resources to be had here. I've saved an incredible amount of stupid questions just by using the search button on this forum. So definitely head over there if you have any questions beyond the video, or you're just getting into time-lapse, you have no idea where to start. This is the place to start. Specifically, I'm new to time-lapse, so definitely go to timescapes.org and click forum. So let's go ahead and go back to LR Timelapse. Now, you may be wondering why there's checkboxes on every single portion of these properties. So the reason for that is every single one of these elements is keyframeable. So if you remember in Bridge how I was talking about you can make keyframeable adjustments from the first picture to the last picture. Now I don't need to do that, but if I did need to, all I would do is select the first photo, as I've already done, go all the way down to the bottom, and then shift click, and then all I would do is hit linear, eased, basically whatever transition you need for what you're doing. And the beauty of all this is it's not rendering video, it's purely in the metadata. The reason that I use it mostly is for deflickering, and it's just really good at deflickering. So we're going to go ahead and click deflicker. Usually the default settings work good for me. I don't encounter flicker too much in my time lapses, but when the dreaded beast does rear its head, this is a good program to bring it to. Now, depending on how much flicker you have, you may want to adjust these settings. The default usually works for me, but if you have a lot more flicker than normal, you may want to crank up the settings. And I usually like to use the linear transition, so I'm just going to go ahead and click linear. And then here, all we need to do once we've made all of our adjustments is to just go ahead and click save, and then just let it do its thing. And it takes no time at all, and it'll tell you whether or not it has changed every single picture. And as we scroll down, we can see that it has all 224 pictures. If you're unfamiliar with the word metadata, it's simply the information that is in these XMP files. Every camera raw picture has XMP files with those adjustments that you made in the camera raw dialog box. And they're completely non-destructive, which is a fantastic thing about camera raw. So if you're wondering what those XMP files are, they're simply just the adjustments that you made in Adobe Bridge camera raw dialog. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And that's going to be the end of LR Timelapse for our workflow. The next step is to go over to After Effects. And as you can see, I've already got my project laid out for us. My time-lapse is already framed up here. It's about 9 seconds long. So if you're wondering about how to import image sequences or really any files into After Effects, all you need to do is move your mouse over in this general area and go ahead and double click, and then immediately comes up with import file. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to my photos, and then as you can see, all you need to do to import the image sequence is click on the first picture in the sequence, and it immediately recognizes it's a camera raw image sequence, and you import it as footage. Make sure this is checked, and you may need to use forced alphabetical order, but I never have, so I doubt you will. So I don't actually need to import it, so I'm just going to go ahead and click cancel. Now, one tip that you should be very aware of is, even if I create a new composition and say I have some funky frame rate like 4.82 frames per second for some reason, that it doesn't necessarily affect how long my time lapse is going to be. And you might be scratching your head over that, but it has something to do with the preferences of After Effects. So if you go to Preferences, Import, immediately here you can see Sequence Footage. Now, sequence footage is image sequences. So my image sequence over here, no matter what composition frame rate I put it at, it's going to be 23.976 frames per second. This image sequence is going to be that regardless. So whatever you want your time lapse to be, like if you're doing broadcast, you'd want to change this to 29.97, but in this case we don't need to do that, so I'm just going to go ahead and click cancel. I just wanted to remind you, always set this to what you want your footage to be. So, and as you can see, I've already created a new composition. All you need to do to create a new composition is click down here in the project panel, or go up to Composition, New Composition, and then just to simply go over the properties I use for my composition, we can go into the settings here, and I usually do 1920 by 1080 and a square pixels aspect ratio at 23.976 frames per second. Most of what I do does not involve projecting it on screens or screens that are need to have a higher resolution than that, so there's really no reason for me to do that. You may have different needs, adjust accordingly. So I'm going to go ahead and click cancel just to get out of that. And all you need to do to bring your image sequence into the composition is to just click and drag and drop. But as you can see, I've already done that. So your next step is simply going to be to go into the scale. Just go ahead and hit S for scale. And as you can see, the borders here are simply because I've changed the scale to 37%. If I change it to, say, 100, the picture is going to be extremely zoomed in, and if we wanted to do a Ken Burns type move, we could do that, but in my opinion, that's extremely overdone. So you can keyframe scale if you need be. If you don't need to make any other adjustments, go over to the position, and you can adjust the X and Y axis to move it up, down, side, you know, whatever you need or whatever you're trying to do. So you can easily reframe this shot. I've already done it, so I don't need to reframe my shot. And the keyboard shortcut for that is P for position. Just to review, P for position and S for scale. And then the last step in adjusting this is going to be to go into the effects controls and add any color correction or sharpening, basically whatever you want to do to get the most quality out of your image. I like to add an unsharp mask every now and again. Obviously you don't want to crank it up way too much because it looks very unnatural, but in this case it does add a little bit of sharpening back into the image, and I'm going to go ahead and just show you exactly how much sharpening. It's more noticeable in areas like this, like the branches. And then I also added a little curves adjustment purely to just add a little more contrast in the scene, make it a little more dynamic than it was before. It really depends on what you're doing. You may not want to do any color correction if you're taking it to an editor like Final Cut Pro, Premiere Pro, CS5, or Avid Media Composer. So it really just depends, again, on what your needs are for the project. So the next step is going to be to go in here and hit Add to Render Queue. Again, I've already done that, so I don't need to add to render queue, so I'm just going to get out of that and head over to my render queue. And as you can see, I've got my composition name right here. Best settings, I usually leave that alone. The output module is where you're going to choose your codec, or the flavor of video codec that you're going to need for whatever you're doing next. I've got presets here for ProRes. PC users may need to choose something else. Again, just pick the best resolution codec you can get, because the more times you encode a video, or compress it rather, the more chances you have to introduce artifacts and just basically the side effects of compression. So we're actually going to go over here to the output module, and then if you click on the composition name, it'll show you exactly where it's going to go. So Sunset 5 is going to go in the rendered folder here. If I needed to put it in another folder, I'd simply navigate to it. I don't need to, so I'm just going to go ahead and click cancel. And then immediately when you're ready to render, save it. And if you're a Mac user, I'm going to show you a method of rendering in Terminal that that'll definitely help save you a lot of time. So if you are a PC user and you don't have Terminal, all you need to do is just go ahead and click render and then turn on caps lock to disable the preview window here. That'll save you a little bit of render time. So I'm going to go ahead and quit After Effects and then go over back here to Terminal. And this method really isn't all that hard for all you Mac users out there. So just going to go ahead and open Finder and then go over here into the After Effects folder, and AE Render is responsible, as you might guess, for all your After Effects renders. So just go ahead and drag it over here. Your screen should look like this with the plus sign, and just let go. And then it's going to show the path of the application. And then go ahead and click in your terminal window and type -project. It's simply telling it, I want to render this project. So all you need to do is to navigate to where your After Effects project file is. Mine is right here. So all you need to do, again, is click and drag your project file over to Terminal, again, with the plus sign, and then go ahead and let go. And then just go back over here to Terminal, hit Enter, and then it'll show you the settings that you chose for your composition, and then it'll go through all the motions of rendering. So with that, we've come to the end of this tutorial. I do thank you for watching, and this is your host, the Red Owl, signing off. Hoot.